The crystal caves of Nethros Prime had been silent for 800 years. Dust particles danced in the thin beams of light that pierced through cracks in the ancient ceiling, casting ghostly shadows across walls covered in symbols from a civilization long gone. Kira Voss knelt beside a strange metallic structure, her scanner humming softly as it analyzed the composition of the alien material. She was a freelance archaeologist, someone who made her living exploring dead worlds and selling her findings to universities and private collectors. Her reputation was built on being thorough, careful, and most importantly, lucky. Today, she felt anything but lucky. The ruins had been empty for days, yielding nothing but broken pottery and indecipherable text fragments. Her supplies were running low, and the transport ship that had dropped her off would not return for another week. She was about to pack up her equipment when her scanner detected something unusual. A massive energy signature, faint but steady, coming from deeper within the cave system. Kira checked her oxygen levels, grabbed her portable light, and headed toward the source of the reading. The passage narrowed as she walked, forcing her to squeeze through gaps in the rock. Her breath echoed inside her helmet, a rhythmic sound that kept her company in the oppressive silence. After 20 minutes of careful climbing, she emerged into a chamber that took her breath away. The room was enormous, easily 100 meters across, with a domed ceiling that sparkled with embedded crystals. In the center stood a containment pod unlike anything Kira had ever seen. It was constructed from a translucent material that seemed to shift between solid and liquid, held together by pillars of light that hummed with barely contained power. Inside the pod was a dragon. Kira had seen recordings of the Skyborn, the ancient dragon species that had once ruled this sector of space. They were believed to be extinct, wiped out during the Convergence Wars 3 centuries ago. But this creature was different from the images she had studied. Her scales were the color of moonlight, a pale silver that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously. Her body was sleek and graceful, built for speed rather than raw power. Massive wings were folded against her sides, but they were wrong somehow. Kira moved closer, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. The wings were bound by thick metal restraints that had fused into the creature's flesh over time. The restraints glowed with a dull red light, pulsing in rhythm with some unknown mechanism. Scars criss-caged the wing membranes, evidence of old injuries that had healed poorly. The dragon's eyes were closed, her breathing slow and shallow. Kira assumed she was in some form of stasis, preserved but not truly alive. She was wrong. The moment Kira's gloved hand touched the surface of the pod, those eyes opened. They were violet, deep and brilliant, filled with an intelligence that made Kira take an involuntary step backward. The dragon's gaze focused on her, studying her with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey. Then, impossibly, she spoke. The words came not from her mouth, but from a translator device embedded in the pod's control panel. The voice was feminine, melodic, and carried the weight of centuries. "You should not have come here, human. This place is forbidden." The translator gave the words a flat, emotionless quality, but Kira could hear something else underneath. Loneliness. Desperation. Hope. Kira found her voice, though it came out shakier than she intended. "I am Kira Voss. I am an archaeologist. I mean you no harm." The dragon's expression did not change. "I am called Seraphine. I was a guardian of the eternal archive, protector of knowledge that your kind has long forgotten. I have been imprisoned here for 817 years, 4 months, and 9 days." The precision of that statement sent a chill down Kira's spine. "You have been conscious this entire time?" "Every moment," Seraphine replied. "Every hour. Every day. Every year. I have counted them all." Kira walked around the pod, examining it from different angles. Her medical scanner, designed to work on multiple species, painted a disturbing picture. The restraints on Seraphine's wings were not just physical barriers. They were draining her energy, siphoning off her life force to power the prison itself. It was a cruel design, keeping the prisoner alive specifically to fuel their own captivity. Why would someone do this to you? Kira asked. Betrayal, Seraphine said simply. During the final days of the war, my own council feared the knowledge I protected. They believed it was too dangerous to exist. They could not bring themselves to destroy it, so they destroyed me instead. Locked me away where no one would ever find me. Kira's fingers moved across her scanner, analyzing the pod's systems. She was not an engineer, but she had broken into enough sealed tombs to understand basic locking mechanisms. This was far more complex than anything she had encountered before. The entire structure was designed to be tamper-proof, with fail-safes built upon fail-safes. Any attempt to force it open would likely kill Seraphine instantly. Can you be freed? Kira asked. Seraphine's violet eyes closed slowly, a gesture that seemed to carry immense weariness. Many have tried. None have succeeded. The pod requires a specific genetic signature to open, one that belonged to the council members who sealed me here. They are all dead now, killed in the war they were so afraid of. Kira sat down on the cave floor, her mind racing. She thought about walking away, reporting her findings to the Galactic Heritage Foundation, and letting them handle it. That was the smart choice. The safe choice. But something in Seraphine's eyes had struck a chord deep within her. Kira understood what it meant to be trapped. She had spent her entire childhood in a medical facility, her body ravaged by a degenerative illness that the doctors said would kill her before she turned 20. She had survived through sheer stubbornness and experimental treatments that were barely legal. She knew what it felt like to watch the world continue without you, powerless to participate. What if there was another way? Kira said suddenly. Seraphine's eyes opened. Explain. Your council used their genetic signatures as a key. But genetic locks can be tricked. If I could synthesize a close enough match, or find a way to override the recognition system. You would die in the attempt, Seraphine interrupted. The pod has defensive protocols. It has killed 3 people who tried to tamper with it over the centuries. Their remains are scattered throughout this chamber, though time has turned them to dust. Kira stood up, brushing dirt from her suit. Then I will be very careful. Why would you risk this? Seraphine asked. The question held genuine confusion. You owe me nothing. We are strangers. You could leave right now and live a long, safe life. Kira smiled, though Seraphine could not see it through her helmet. Because 800 years is long enough for anyone to be alone. She pulled out her analysis tools and began scanning the pod's control systems in detail. The readings were complex, layers upon layers of code and biological verification protocols. But Kira had cracked alien security systems before. This would just take time, patience, and a willingness to risk everything. Over the next 3 days, Kira barely slept. She set up a small camp inside the chamber, eating ration bars and drinking recycled water while she worked. Her equipment was not designed for this kind of analysis, but she improvised, combining her archaeological scanners with the medical tools she carried for emergencies. Seraphine watched her work in silence, occasionally offering insights about skyborne technology when Kira asked. The dragon's knowledge was vast, covering everything from quantum physics to ancient poetry. They talked during the long hours, sharing stories of their lives. Seraphine described flying through nebulas, the sensation of stellar winds against her wings, the joy of diving through planetary atmospheres at speeds that would tear most ships apart. She spoke of the archive she had guarded, a library containing the accumulated knowledge of 20 extinct civilizations. Kira told her about Earth, about humanity's stubborn refusal to give up even when the odds were impossible. She described the taste of real coffee, the sound of rain on metal roofs, the feeling of standing on a beach and watching the sun set over an ocean. On the 4th day, Kira made a breakthrough. The genetic lock was not actually checking for an exact match. It was looking for specific markers, proteins that indicated membership in the Skyborn ruling caste. If she could synthesize those markers and introduce them into the system, she might be able to fool it. The problem was obtaining the raw materials. She needed Skyborn DNA, and the only source available was Seraphine herself. "This is going to hurt," Kira warned. "I need to extract a tissue sample through the pod's membrane. The process will probably trigger some kind of defensive response." "Do it," Seraphine said without hesitation. Kira positioned her extraction tool against the pod's surface. The moment it made contact, alarms screamed through the chamber. Red lights flashed, and the pillars of light holding the pod intensified. Kira gritted her teeth and pushed forward, forcing the tool through the membrane. It felt like pushing through solid steel, resistance building with every centimeter. Seraphine made no sound, but her body tensed, wings straining against their restraints. The tool finally pierced through, and Kira extracted a small sample of scale and tissue. She withdrew quickly, and the pod sealed itself, the alarms gradually fading. Kira's hands were shaking as she loaded the sample into her portable gene sequencer. The machine hummed, breaking down the DNA into its component parts. Kira spent the next 6 hours creating a synthetic version of the required proteins, using chemical compounds from her emergency medical supplies. The result was crude, unstable, but it might work. She approached the pod's control panel with her synthesized key. This was the moment of truth. If her calculations were wrong, the defensive systems would activate and she would have seconds to run before the chamber filled with lethal radiation. Seraphine watched her, those violet eyes steady and calm. "You do not have to do this," the dragon said softly. "You have already given me more than anyone has in 8 centuries. You have given me hope." Kira inserted the synthesized proteins into the control panel's receptor port. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the pod began to hum, a deep vibration that Kira felt in her bones. The pillars of light flickered, and the restraints on Seraphine's wings began to glow brighter. The control panel lit up with symbols that Kira could not read, ancient skyborn script that flowed across the surface like liquid fire. She held her breath, waiting for either success or catastrophic failure. The synthesized proteins were being analyzed by security systems that had not been activated in centuries, compared against genetic databases that might no longer exist. Seraphine remained perfectly still inside the pod, her violet eyes fixed on Kira with an intensity that was almost painful to meet. The chamber filled with a high-pitched whine that grew louder with each passing second. Kira's scanner showed energy levels spiking throughout the pod's structure. Either the lock was accepting her override or it was preparing to incinerate them both. She thought about her life, about all the risks she had taken to get this far. She had survived an illness that should have killed her. She had explored ruins on worlds where the atmosphere could melt steel. She had faced down pirates, corrupt officials, and natural disasters. But she had never felt as vulnerable as she did in this moment, watching ancient alien technology decide whether she lived or died. The whine reached a crescendo, and then suddenly stopped. The chamber fell silent. The restraints on Seraphine's wings cracked, hairline fractures spreading across the metal like ice breaking in spring. The restraints shattered, pieces falling away to reveal wing membranes that were scarred and damaged but finally free. The translucent walls of the pod began to dissolve, turning from solid to mist in seconds. Seraphine stumbled forward, her legs unsteady after centuries of immobility. She collapsed onto the stone floor, her massive body shaking. Kira rushed to her side, her medical training overriding her awe. She ran her scanner across Seraphine's body, checking vital signs. The dragon's heart rate was erratic, her breathing shallow. 800 years of imprisonment had taken a terrible toll. Malnutrition, muscle atrophy, and systemic damage from the energy drain had left Seraphine's body in a critical state. "Do not waste your supplies on me," Seraphine whispered. Her voice no longer came from a translator but from her own throat, rough and weak. "I am free. That is enough. Like hell it is, Kira said sharply. She pulled out every medical stimulant she had, adapting the dosages for Seraphine's physiology. She injected nutrients directly into the major blood vessels she could reach, hoping that skyborne biology was similar enough to other species she had treated. Seraphine's body was cold to the touch, her scales dull and lifeless. Kira wrapped her own thermal blanket around the dragon's torso, knowing it was woefully inadequate but unable to think of anything else to do. For hours, Kira worked frantically, monitoring Seraphine's condition and adjusting her treatment as best she could. The dragon drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid, sometimes delirious. During one lucid moment, she looked at Kira with those ancient eyes and said something that would stay with the archaeologist forever. You did not do this for glory or profit. You did this because you saw someone suffering and chose to act. That is the mark of true strength. Kira wiped sweat from her forehead, exhausted but refusing to stop. Just rest. Save your energy. As dawn broke across Nethros Prime, light filtering through the cracks in the chamber ceiling, Seraphine's condition stabilized. Her heart rate became steady, her breathing deeper. Color began to return to her scales, that pale silver brightening until it almost glowed. She opened her eyes fully and pushed herself into a sitting position. Her wings, damaged and scarred as they were, spread slightly, testing their range of motion. The movement was clumsy, painful, but it was movement. For the first time in 800 years, Seraphine could control her own body. Thank you, Seraphine said simply. Those two words carried more weight than any grand speech could have. Kira nodded, too tired to respond properly. She sat down against the chamber wall, finally allowing herself to rest. Her supplies were almost depleted, her equipment damaged from the strain of the past days, but none of that mattered. She had succeeded. Seraphine was free. As Kira began to doze off, she heard Seraphine moving carefully around the chamber, exploring the space that had been her prison for so long. When Kira woke several hours later, she found Seraphine sitting near the chamber entrance, staring out at the landscape beyond. The dragon's posture was contemplative, her tail wrapped around her body in a protective gesture. Kira approached quietly, not wanting to disturb the moment. Seraphine spoke without turning around. I thought I had forgotten what the sky looked like. But now that I see it again, I realize I never forgot. I simply stopped believing I would ever see it again. Kira sat down beside her, marveling at the view. The crystal caves overlooked a vast desert valley, the sand rippling in patterns created by wind and time. Twin moons hung low on the horizon, casting everything in shades of blue and silver. It is beautiful, Kira said. It is freedom, Seraphine replied. She turned to look at Kira directly. But I have a problem. My wings are damaged beyond my ability to heal naturally. I can move them now, but I cannot fly. And a skyborn who cannot fly is only half alive. Kira pulled out her scanner and examined Seraphine's wings more carefully. The damage was extensive. Old fractures that had healed incorrectly, torn membranes, atrophied flight muscles. It would take extensive surgery and rehabilitation to restore full function, procedures that were far beyond Kira's capabilities. She knew only one place that might have the resources to help. There is a medical station in the Kepler system. They specialize in xenobiology and have treated hundreds of different species. If anyone can help you, it is them. Seraphine's expression was difficult to read. Will they not simply imprison me again? I am a relic of a dead civilization, a potential threat. Why would they help me? Because not everyone is afraid of what they do not understand, Kira said firmly. And because I will make sure they do. Seraphine considered this for a long moment, then slowly nodded. Very well. I will trust your judgment. But how will we reach this medical station? My ship cannot carry a passenger your size, and we are weeks away from any major transport routes. That is where things get complicated, Kira admitted. She pulled up a star chart on her portable display. The transport ship that dropped me here will return in 3 days. They might be willing to make a detour if I offer them enough credits, but I do not have that kind of money. Seraphine's eyes gleamed with something that might have been amusement. But I do. The archive I guarded was not just filled with knowledge. It also contained treasures beyond imagination. Artifacts, precious metals, technology that your civilization has not yet dreamed of. If we can reach it before my former council's descendants claim it, we will have more than enough resources to pay for any medical treatment I require. Kira felt her pulse quicken. An intact skyborne archive would be the archaeological find of the century. But more importantly, it represented a way to help Seraphine without relying on charity or goodwill that might not materialize. Where is this archive? Off-world, Seraphine said. Hidden in a facility that only I know how to access. It will require travel, and there may be dangers. My people were thorough in protecting their secrets. But if you are willing to continue this journey with me, I promise you will be rewarded beyond your wildest expectations. Kira thought about the risks. She thought about her simple life as a freelance archaeologist, exploring dead ruins and selling her findings to stay afloat. She thought about the transport ship that would arrive in 3 days, offering her a safe return to civilization. Then she thought about Seraphine, a being who had spent 8 centuries alone, who deserved the chance to fly again. The choice was not difficult. I am with you, Kira said. Wherever this leads. Seraphine's expression softened, something that might have been a smile crossing her draconic features. Then we should prepare. The transport will arrive soon, and we have much to plan. The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity. Kira packed up her equipment while Seraphine explored the cave system, stretching muscles that had not moved in centuries. Despite her injuries, the dragon moved with a grace that spoke of her species' natural elegance. She taught Kira basic phrases in the skyborne language, helping her understand the symbols carved throughout the ruins. In return, Kira shared stories of human history, of Earth's long climb from primitive origins to spacefaring civilization. They talked about everything and nothing. Seraphine described the culture of her people, their complex social hierarchies based on flight prowess and knowledge accumulation. Kira explained human concepts like humor, democracy, and coffee addiction. They found common ground in unexpected places, discovering that despite the vast differences in their species, they shared similar values of curiosity, compassion, and stubborn determination. When the transport ship finally appeared in the sky above Nethros Prime, Kira felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The ship's captain, a gruff woman named Taryn Blackwood, was less than thrilled to see Seraphine. She stood at the bottom of the loading ramp, arms crossed, staring up at the dragon with undisguised suspicion. You did not mention anything about passengers when you contracted this trip, Blackwood said accusingly. Especially not passengers of the giant dragon variety. Kira had prepared for this reaction. I am willing to pay triple the agreed rate if you can make a detour to the outer reaches. We need to retrieve something valuable, something that will more than cover the expense. Blackwood's expression shifted from suspicion to interest. How valuable? Enough to buy your own fleet, Kira said. Seraphine remained silent during this exchange, allowing Kira to negotiate. The dragon had explained earlier that humans often responded better to other humans, especially in commercial transactions. Blackwood studied them both for a long moment, her eyes calculating. Then she sighed heavily. Triple rate, plus 10% of whatever you recover. And if this turns out to be some kind of trick, I will space you both. Deal, Kira said quickly, before Blackwood could change her mind. The captain gestured toward the cargo bay. Get your dragon aboard. And she better not eat anyone. Seraphine followed Kira up the ramp, moving carefully to avoid damaging the ship with her bulk. The cargo bay was barely large enough to accommodate her, forcing her to fold her wings tightly against her body. Other crew members watched from doorways, their expressions ranging from fear to fascination. Kira set up a small area near Seraphine, laying out her bedroll and equipment. As the ship lifted off from Nethros Prime, Kira felt the familiar lurch of entering orbit. Through the cargo bay's small viewports, she watched the planet shrink beneath them, becoming just another point of light against the vast darkness of space. Seraphine pressed her face against one of the viewports, her violet eyes wide. "I have not seen the stars from this perspective in so long," she said quietly. "It is even more beautiful than I remembered." Kira joined her at the viewport. "Where exactly are we going?" "To the Veil sector," Seraphine replied. "There is a system there that was abandoned during the war, considered too dangerous to inhabit. The archive is hidden in a facility built into an asteroid orbiting a dead star. It will take us approximately 2 weeks to reach it, assuming your ship's engines are adequate." Kira relayed this information to Blackwood, who plotted the course with minimal complaint. 2 weeks. Plenty of time for things to go wrong, for complications to arise. But also plenty of time for Kira and Seraphine to prepare for whatever awaited them at the archive. The journey through space gave Kira and Seraphine time to forge a deeper connection. The crew of Blackwood's ship, after their initial wariness, began to warm up to the unusual passenger. Seraphine proved to be an endless source of stories, describing civilizations that had risen and fallen millennia before humanity had even discovered fire. The ship's engineer, a young man named Dex Harmon, became particularly fascinated with skyborne technology. He spent hours listening to Seraphine explain propulsion systems that could fold space itself, weapons that could ignite atmospheres, and shields that bent reality. Kira used the time to research everything she could find about the Veil sector. The records were sparse and often contradictory. The area had been sealed off by multiple governments after the Convergence Wars, declared a dead zone due to dangerous radiation levels and unstable gravitational anomalies. Ships that entered rarely returned, and those that did brought back reports of strange phenomena. Spatial distortions, phantom signals, entire crews driven mad by unknown influences. Most scientists believed the area was simply too hostile to support any kind of expedition. But Seraphine insisted the dangers were exaggerated. The Skyborn had deliberately spread false information to discourage treasure hunters and scavengers from finding the archive. The real hazards were specific security measures that could be bypassed if you knew the correct protocols. As they approached the Veil sector's boundary, Blackwood called everyone to the bridge. The view screen showed a swirling mass of purple and black energy, lightning crackling across what appeared to be tears in space itself. "That is your destination?" Blackwood asked incredulously. "You want me to fly into that?" Seraphine moved to stand beside the captain, her massive frame filling half the bridge. "The distortions follow a pattern. If you input these coordinates and maintain this exact trajectory, we will pass through safely." She rattled off a series of numbers that made Dex scramble to input them into the navigation system. Blackwood looked at Kira, who nodded. Against what was probably her better judgment, Blackwood engaged the engines. The ship plunged into the Veil. Immediately, alarms began screaming. The hull groaned under impossible stresses as reality bent around them. Through the view screen, Kira saw impossible things. Stars that burned backwards, planets that existed in multiple locations simultaneously, shapes that hurt to look at because they had too many dimensions. Crew members grabbed onto support rails as the ship bucked and twisted. Seraphine stood perfectly still, her eyes closed, murmuring directions in the ancient Skyborn language. Blackwood followed the instructions exactly, adjusting their course by fractions of degrees. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, they emerged into calm space. The view screen now showed a sight that took Kira's breath away. A dead star hung in the void, its surface black and cold, surrounded by a ring of asteroids that glowed with internal light. One asteroid in particular shone brighter than the others, covered in geometric patterns that pulsed with energy. "That is it," Seraphine said. "The archive." Blackwood maneuvered the ship closer, navigating through the asteroid field with practiced skill. As they approached the glowing asteroid, Kira could see that the patterns on its surface were actually massive doors, sealed tight but clearly designed to open. "Seraphine, how do we get inside?" Kira asked. The dragon's expression grew somber. "With blood. The Archive's final security measure requires genetic verification from a guardian. I must touch the entrance directly. That means going outside the ship." Kira understood the implications immediately. Seraphine's wings were damaged, her body still recovering from centuries of imprisonment. A spacewalk in her condition would be dangerous. Blackwood voiced the concern. "Can she survive in vacuum?" "Skyborn are remarkably resilient," Seraphine said. "I will need a tether to prevent drift, but I can endure the exposure long enough to open the doors." Dex rigged up a heavy-duty tether from the ship's maintenance cables while Kira helped Seraphine prepare. The dragon refused any protective equipment, explaining that it would interfere with the genetic scanner. As the airlock opened and Seraphine drifted out into the void, Kira watched through the external cameras, her heart in her throat. The dragon moved through space with surprising grace, using her tail as a rudder to navigate toward the asteroid. When she reached the surface, she pressed both front claws against the glowing patterns. Nothing happened for several seconds. Then the entire asteroid began to shake. The geometric patterns flared brilliant white, and the massive doors started to open, revealing a cavernous interior filled with light. Seraphine pulled herself back toward the ship, Dex reeling in the tether. Once she was safely aboard and the airlock sealed, the ship entered the asteroid. The interior was impossibly large, far bigger than the asteroid's exterior dimensions should have allowed. "Spatial folding technology," Seraphine explained. "The Archive exists partially outside normal space." They flew through corridors lined with crystalline structures that branched like frozen lightning. Storage chambers branched off in every direction, each one containing artifacts protected behind energy fields. Kira saw weapons that looked like liquid fire frozen in glass, sculptures that seemed to move when she wasn't looking directly at them, texts written in light itself. The wealth of knowledge and treasure was beyond anything she had imagined. But Seraphine guided them past all of it, deeper into the Archive's heart. Finally, they reached a central chamber dominated by a massive sphere of pure white crystal. Inside the sphere, Kira could see shapes moving, information flowing in patterns too complex to follow. "This is the Archive's core," Seraphine said. "Every piece of knowledge my people deemed worth preserving. Scientific discoveries, historical records, philosophical treatises, artistic masterpieces. The accumulated wisdom of 20 civilizations, including my own." Kira approached the sphere cautiously. "How do we access it?" "We do not," Seraphine said. "Not yet. I brought us here for something more immediate." She led them to a side chamber where medical equipment far more advanced than anything Kira had seen was stored. These devices were designed to heal skyborne injuries, including wing damage. "With your help, I believe I can repair myself enough to fly again." Kira examined the equipment, her archaeological training allowing her to puzzle out the basic functions. It would take time and careful work, but it was possible. Over the next several days, they transformed the chamber into a surgical suite. Blackwood's crew helped where they could, moving equipment and monitoring systems. Seraphine guided Kira through the process, explaining skyborne anatomy in detail. The actual procedure was delicate work, using alien technology to knit torn membranes back together, realign bones that had healed incorrectly, and stimulate atrophied muscles to regenerate. Kira worked with steady hands, remembering her own experience with experimental medical treatments. The hardest part was watching Seraphine endure the pain. The dragon remained stoic throughout, but Kira could see the strain in her eyes, the way her claws dug into the medical platform. During breaks, they talked to distract from the discomfort. Seraphine spoke of her dreams during those 800 years of imprisonment, the places she wanted to see again, the skies she wanted to fly through. Kira shared her own dreams, the ruins she wanted to explore, the discoveries she hoped to make. They found comfort in each other's company, a friendship forged through shared struggle. Finally, after 5 days of intensive work, the repairs were complete. Seraphine's wings were still scarred, the membranes showing traces of old injuries, but they were functional. She stood in the center of the chamber, spreading her wings fully for the first time in 8 centuries. The wingspan was magnificent, easily 20 meters from tip to tip. She tested them carefully, feeling the play of muscles that had been dormant for so long. "It is not perfect," Seraphine said. "But it is enough." They returned to the ship, and Blackwood piloted them back out into the open space within the archive. Seraphine stood at the airlock, looking out at the vast interior chamber. Kira stood beside her. "Are you ready?" she asked. The dragon's violet eyes gleamed with an emotion Kira had never seen there before. "Joy. I have been ready for 800 years." The airlock opened, and Seraphine launched herself into the void. For a moment, she simply drifted, adjusting to the sensation of weightlessness without restraints. Then she spread her wings and began to fly. In the zero-gravity environment, it was more like swimming through space, using her wings to generate thrust and control direction. She spiraled upward, looping around the crystalline structures, diving between columns of frozen light. Her movements were clumsy at first, muscle memory struggling to reassert itself. But with each passing minute, she grew more confident, more graceful. Kira watched from the ship's bridge, tears streaming down her face. Blackwood stood beside her, equally moved by the sight. "That is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen," the captain said quietly. Seraphine flew for hours, exploring every corner of the archive's interior, relearning the joy of movement through 3-dimensional space. When she finally returned to the ship, exhausted but radiant, she looked at Kira with gratitude that words could not express. "You gave me back my life," Seraphine said. "Not just freedom, but the ability to truly live. How can I ever repay such a gift?" "You already have," Kira replied. "You reminded me why I became an archaeologist in the first place. To find lost things and bring them back into the light." They loaded the ship with carefully selected artifacts from the archive, enough to make everyone aboard wealthy beyond measure but not so much that they would attract dangerous attention. Seraphine sealed the archive behind them, encoding new security protocols that only she and Kira knew. As they prepared to leave the Veil sector, Kira felt a sense of completion she had never experienced before. The journey back through the spatial distortions was easier now that they knew the route. As they emerged into normal space, Blackwood set course for the medical station in the Kepler system. Seraphine still needed proper treatment to fully heal, but she could fly. That was what mattered. Kira stood beside her friend on the bridge, looking out at the stars. "What will you do after the medical treatment?" she asked. "Explore," Seraphine said simply. "I want to see what the universe has become in my absence." "And you?" "I think I will go with you," Kira said. "If you will have me. Someone needs to document your discoveries, and I am already the best friend you have." Seraphine's laugh was like wind chimes, musical and pure. "Then we are agreed. 2 explorers, seeking the unknown together." Blackwood interrupted their moment. "We are approaching a settled system. I am picking up distress signals. Multiple ships under attack by pirates." Seraphine's expression hardened. "Can this vessel fight?" "It has weapons, but not enough to take on a whole pirate fleet," Blackwood admitted. "Then it is fortunate you have me," Seraphine said. She moved toward the airlock. "Open the bay doors. I may not be fully healed, but I am more than capable of dealing with pirates." Kira tried to protest, but Seraphine silenced her with a look. "I have been a prisoner and a patient for too long. Let me be a guardian again, even if just for a moment." Blackwood opened the bay doors, and Seraphine launched herself into space. Kira watched through the external cameras as the dragon flew toward the battle, her silver scales catching the light of distant stars. What happened next would become legend throughout the sector. A dragon thought extinct, appearing from nowhere to defend innocent traders from pirate attack. Witnesses described her as an angel of vengeance, her wings cutting through the void, her breath weapon a stream of superheated plasma that melted pirate hulls like butter. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes. By the time it was over, the pirates had either fled or been destroyed, and the trading ships were safe. Seraphine returned to Blackwood's vessel, her scales scorched but her eyes bright with satisfaction. "I had forgotten what it felt like to protect others," she said. "To use my strength for something meaningful." The rescued traders broadcast messages of gratitude across every channel. Within hours, the story had spread. A dragon had returned. Hope had returned. Kira realized in that moment that their journey was just beginning. Seraphine was not just a relic of the past. She was a bridge between worlds, a symbol of resilience and second chances. Together, they would explore the universe, uncover lost knowledge, and perhaps most importantly, prove that kindness and courage could change everything. As Blackwood's ship continued toward the Kepler system, Kira looked at Seraphine and smiled. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." The dragon nodded, her violet eyes reflecting the stars. "Together," she agreed. And for both of them, that promise was enough.